Copy, paste, and paste new. In this video, we'll use copy and paste new, and explain the differences between paste and paste new, as well as use press pull. In Fusion 360, we want to carry on with our gear reduction housing assembly. If you had any difficulties creating the copies of the hardware, you can also upload the supplied dataset Gear Reduction Housing Assembly v5. From here, we want to continue to use copy and paste. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we understand some of the differences between using paste and something called paste new. To get started, I'm going to hide the front cover, and I also want to hide all of the hardware. So I'm going to start by selecting the eye icon on all the hardware. Note that you can also do this by selecting all the hardware, right-clicking, and selecting Show Hide. You also have a Show All Components and Show All Bodies option. From here, what we want to do is we want to begin creating a copy of the smaller idler gear, and then we also need to create a copy of it that we can modify. So we're going to select the spur gear 10 teeth, we'll right-click, and we'll select Copy. Then, at the bottom of the browser, we're going to right-click and select Paste. This automatically invokes the Move Object components, and we can move it roughly into place, but ultimately we're going to be using Align to position it. You'll notice that it's not quite in the right position, so I'll go to Modify, Align, and then I'll begin by using Controller Command to select the bottom position of the gear, and then I want to select the top position of that hole. I'm going to capture the position and say OK. This will be important later on when we begin to add our joints because we can use as-built joints if everything is in the correct position. Now that we've created the identical copy of our idler gear, we want to create the version that is the 21mm long idler gear that's going to connect this idler to the drive gear. In order to do that, we need to use something called paste new. You can see that here we have spur gear 10 teeth :1 and spur gear 10 teeth :2. This means that they're both identical copies, and any changes I make to one will affect the other. This also means that downstream in a bill of materials parts list, what we're going to see is that we have a quantity of 2 of that gear. If we instead select the gear and we copy it, and then if we right-click at the bottom of the browser and we select Paste New, the Paste New option will create a new unique version of that component. We're going to move it off to the right-hand side, we'll capture its position and we'll say OK. Notice that it's still called spur gear 10 teeth, but instead of a :2 after it, it has brackets with a 1 and a :1. We can select and rename this, and instead of 10 teeth, I'm going to put in brackets long, so that way we know that this is the long idler gear. Now, you'll remember that this idler gear is supposed to be 21mm long. If I hide the back housing, it's going to need to travel from the front of this gear all the way to the back of this gear. Now let's go ahead and use Inspect and measure the distance to make sure we understand how far it has to go. The distance between these two is 13mm. So we're going to select a tool called Modify Press Pull. We're going to select the back face of this gear, and we're going to pull it a distance of 13mm. We're going to say OK, and now we've created a long version of that gear that goes from the front of the other idler gears to the back of the drive gear. If we were to do that same operation using press pull on one of the other idler gears, notice that it changes both of them. And once again, that's because those are 2 identical gears. We just have 2 instances or 2 copies of them inside of this assembly. When we use Paste New, what we're doing is we're creating a unique version. Now we need to position that. So in order to do that, we actually have to use either the front cover or the back housing, as there's a position for a shaft to be held in place. So we can use Modify and Align. Again, using Control or Command, we want to select the correct position, capture it, and say OK. Now we can hide the front cover, and we can show all the gears in our design. So we have the larger gear, which we've identified as the drive gear, And then we have the 16 tooth, which is our driven gear, and we have the idler gear train that goes between them. Once again, the idlers all being 10 teeth are not going to affect the overall gear ratio. As we have 48 tooth in and 16 tooth out, that's going to give us our 3-to-1 reduction or increase, depending on whether or not you're talking about torque or RPM. At this point, let's bring back some of the housing. In this case, we'll bring back the back housing and the front housing. And then we want to save this design before moving on.